You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. And welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, joined by my sister, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, and yoga instructor, Tara O'Neill. Here at Journey to Your Best Self, we're all about integrating mind, body, and spirit to help you live a life of purpose and self-discovery. Today, we have a fascinating guest with us, Mr. Bob Martin, a former criminal trial lawyer turned mindfulness teacher, professor, and author. Bob has studied under Hua-Ching Ni, a 72nd generation Taoist master, and brings a unique perspective on how Eastern spiritual traditions like Taoism and Buddhism can connect with teachings of Western spirituality, including Christianity. His work reimagines ancient Eastern wisdom through a Christian lens, offering a bridge between these spiritual worlds. We're excited to dive into how Bob blends Eastern and Western spiritual traditions and ready to explore with him the lessons he's drawn from both as they relate to personal growth, mindfulness, and well-being. I think that everyone viewing and listening is going to learn a lot, and the message that Bob's going to provide really jive with a journey to your best self and your one self and the holistic approach that we preach all the time here. So without any further ado, Bob, welcome aboard.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is. And, if I may, I'd just like to take a second and thank you guys for the work that you do, because, putting a podcast together is not an easy task. And, it's got to be a labor of love to do that so that people like me can have a platform, to share, hopefully, some of the things that we picked up along the way. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to us and a lot to our listeners. And similarly to you, we are, working to pay it forward and to serve others. And so let's start with that. How can meditation help us to serve ourselves and others? I know we are we've come a long way with mindfulness in the West, though there's still this notion of, how can meditation fit into our lives, right? Is it really have to be in lotus pose? Do you have to have these certain practices? Like, can we talk about how you spent decades, doing a pretty Western career and life, and yet you have this wonderful, practice of meditation, mindfulness, and a spiritual connection?
That's funny you say about the lotus connection, because it made me think of Dr. Seuss. Not you can eat it on, but you can do it on your feet. You can do it on your seat. You can do it in the air. You can do it anywhere.
Yes,
love it.
So yeah, posture, I guess, is important at some point in meditation, but not right away. For people that are starting out and for the first couple of years that they do it, the posture it's such a subtle difference that it really makes very little difference starting out. So how does it make a difference? So we take ourselves really seriously, when we see something happen, we get a thought immediately, and you're a therapist, you get the thought, and the thought becomes your immediate reality. And then it operates on you, and it creates emotions within you, and those emotions create the next thoughts, and then an interaction between you and whatever the input is begins. A story comes out of that, and we take it all so seriously. And what meditation does initially is it helps us not be our thoughts. It helps us realize that, well, we have what do you say? You say, I had a thought. So who is the I that had the thought? And when we are the thought, when I see somebody with their pants halfway down their butt and their underwear showing, and I get a judgment saying, I don't like that person, he's a counterculture, he's this, he's that, and I have all of these images of who that person is, when that comes up for me, it becomes my reality. That is my truth. And I would have to be disproven of that truth before I'm willing to change it, because I am my thought. Whatever the thought is, that's what I am. That's my identity. And when we meditate, we don't empty our mind. We don't find some great, enlightenment and nirvana and find peace and tranquility and tinkle, tinkle and hug trees and light crystals and all that kind of stuff. What we do is we start to realize that our thoughts bubble up from somewhere, and it's above my pay grade to say where, and they're here for a minute, and then they go on and they're replaced by another one, and you can't hold it in your hand, and you can't barter it, and you can't sell it, and it's here and it's gone, and you start to realize that these things which don't really exist, they just kind of come and go in the flow of consciousness in your mind, that they're kind of controlling your life. And when you realize that, you start to not take yourself so seriously. And you even find, you might even start giggling about, people that after a few weeks, people start, shaking their head and I can't believe that my life was being run by these ideas and thoughts that just come into my head. And more importantly, I never realized that they just come into my head kind of by default. So what people begin to see is that the I, who is, I had a thought, that I is so much more and so much greater than the thought that I thought I was. Does this make any sense?
Yes,
Is this mapping on it all?
there's a quote or a riddle that I'll never forget, and it goes, people don't have thoughts, thoughts have people. And for a long time I was like, what? I didn't really get the connection. But now when I need like a perspective shift, it's like, all right, these thoughts aren't mine. In a way it can help. I think the perception. But yeah, I think we can all get, even just from that, what you said of taking ourselves so seriously, right? We, where can, like, we make a little lightness of the spiritual path, right? You have such a wonderful demeanor. You're jovial, you're fun, you're lighthearted. Did you always have this? How did that show up in the courtroom? Or, did it evolve, or did it allow you to just be more present when you brought in a more structured meditation practice?
I think that, yes, I think that at a young age I was bubbly and optimistic and a happy little child, but then I was chubby, and that was back in the days where the only place you could get chubby clothes, which they called husky, was at J.C. Penney's, the husky department at J.C. Penney's, and that led to a lot of bullying and a lot of that kind of thing. And I grew up in a carnival, and we traveled for the first 9 years of my life. We had the cotton candy popcorn stand, so I always kind of felt like an outsider. We would drive by schools where kids were playing on the field football or something, and there was a sense of community, and I'd look at it and kind of wistfully, wish that I had that. And then later on in life, fast forward, so there was some, there was some pain. I wouldn't say that it's some of the tragedy or trauma that many people have, but it was my pain, and so it mapped on, and it brought me to a place where I thought that I had to be very successful, and I was driven and the like, and I worked hard at what I was doing, and so there came a time when I became a lawyer, and I wound up working for the mob in Miami during the cocaine cowboy days. And I was going out with those folks to the chrome and glass discotheques of the 1970s. And I was doing, those were the cocaine cowboy days, and the name was well taken. It was all over the place, and I partook, and my private life was going down the tubes. And I always wonder how I never blew my professional life during that period of time, but it was taking a toll on me on a number of levels. So I was seeing a therapist, and I came to a real crossroads in life. And I need to back up in a second and tell you that my folks, we never had a religious or spiritual conversation in my family. My dad was Hungarian royalty, and all of his family was wiped out by the Bolsheviks. My mom was Roma Gypsy, and everybody wiped out her family. So they just came to a conclusion of not being able to believe that there was any kind of a loving God. So we just didn't have that conversation in my family. So I really never was given a North Star or any kind of system of living life with virtue. And so I floundered about, trying to figure out how life worked. Fast forward again to my therapist. So I come to this big crossroads, and I ask him, what should I do, George? What should I do? So he picks up a bag, and he pours out these 3 coins, shakes his coins, and he drops them on the table and starts making some mathematical calculations, drawing some lines on a piece of paper. And finally, he comes up with a number, and he opens up a book to that chapter number, shows me the title. The title was Retreat. Retreat. So, at that day, in those days, $65 an hour was a lot of money. And I was paying this guy $65 an hour to throw coins. I cursed him out and stomped out of the office, of course, thinking that he was some kind of charlatan, and drove around Miami. And the word was just like there, retreat, retreat. And so I went to the projects that I was involved in that were stripping me, and walked in, and I just closed it. And I started doing what in the AA groups and the NA groups we call the 9th step, making amends. And I pulled myself out of it, and that saved me. I've asked him, went back sheepishly, and I asked him what that was. And turned out that he was throwing the coins to consult the I Ching, the classic book of changes, which is a Taoist practice of connecting the intuitive and the verbal mind. And then I found out that he was the disciple and English language editor for Master Hua-Ching Ni. And as you mentioned, a 72nd generation Taoist monk from the Shaolin Temple. So I wound up studying under Master Ni for 8 years. And became a Taoist, I guess I would have identified as. Studied Tai Chi, Qigong, of course the I Ching, read the Tao Te Ching. And Ni was just the most amazing man. And he always talked about having mastery in life. Having mastery in life. And one day we said, what does that mean? We don't understand what that means. Can you tell us what's it like to be you? And his answer was, no rehearsing thoughts. No rehearsing thoughts. This guy lived his life without ever thinking about what he was going to do or what he was going to say. He just did it and said it. And it was always the perfect thing to say. It was always the right thing to do. He's just an amazing man and a great model for me. That was a little bit longer of an answer than what you asked, but
nope,
I'm sorry, that's where it went.
You're taking after him. Thank you. That's a great answer, Brian.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, you forget about, I was just so kind of enthralled by the story. JCPenney, Husky section. Now we're bouncing around to like, the Miami's version of Studio 54 spots, to the guru, the Taoist guru, the therapist who maybe looks kind of like a fortune teller. You're at your carnival growing up. That was like fascinating. I mean, that has to be sold to somewhere. Right away. That was like just amazing. That experience, how all that built you. I guess you can take a lot from a lot of those experiences. I guess you're kind of living a bit of not a contradiction, but there is a dichotomy there of the stereotypical kind of going with the flow of Taoism, right? Versus being an effective attorney, you have to be proactive and you have to plan and you have to be methodical and you don't just show up to the courtroom and speak off the cuff, right? So how did you balance those two kind of worldviews?
Yeah. So they actually balance very well together. And the idea of going with the flow is actually a practice that you learn how to go with the flow. And it creates in Taoism, we have an expression called Wu Wei, Wuwei, which means doing, not doing. And Master Ni was the archetypical example of that, because he never did anything, but nothing remained undone. He didn't do it. It just happened. It was like muscle memory. It's like when a basketball player can't miss the goal and he's having an incredible night, and you say that was an incredible night, and he goes, it didn't even feel like it was me out there. I was in the zone. So we understand that in athletics, and we understand muscle memory. What Taoism teaches us is that it's possible to live life like that. All of life like that. And so as you begin to understand what going with the flow really means, you become more attuned to what's going on around you and the energy that's happening. If I could give you an example. Have you ever been in a situation where you have this terrific idea and it's going to be a wonderful idea and you know it's going to make a difference in everybody's lives and it's going to be terrific, and like nobody wants to listen to you?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Right. We all have,
well,
right?
There's a little disappointment, and you're like,
yeah. So in Taoism, we would say that's a time of obstruction, or that's a time of calculated waiting. We have 64 terms to identify the different energies that exist in interactions. And so what you learn in Taoism is to be able to label the energy that's existing and then align yourself with that energy so that you're effective and efficient. So if nobody's listening to you, then stop talking, right? But use the time, because it will change. All of life is cyclical, and times of not listening turn into times of listening. Day turns into night, night turns into day, summer, winter. And here's what people don't recognize. Good times always turn into bad times, and bad times always turn into good times. And the proof of that is look back on your life. Have good times ever lasted forever? No. Have bad times ever lasted forever? No. So the trick is to recognize the good times and align yourself. If it's good times, most of us have a tendency to coast. And it's the coasting that lets us not take care of the little details that turn the good times into bad times. So we have to remember to pay attention when it's good times and prepare for the times when they go down. And when it's bad times, we have to have hope and not lose patience, because we know it's about to go up. The Chinese symbol for zenith, being at the top, are two symbols, about and going down. And the Chinese symbol for nadir is about to go up. So that is, the Tai Chi symbol. the white and the black with the white ring and the ring with the black with the white ring in it. So the white ring is yang, the black ring is yin. The white dot inside of yin is the seed of yang. And it's going to flourish and grow, and it's going to take over yin. And the yin's going to take over yang. So yang turns to yin and yin turns to yang. Summer turns to winter, winter turns to summer. Life is cyclical. That is the meaning of the Tai Chi, that life is cyclical and that you have to align yourself with the cycle if you want to be effective and efficient.
That's amazing. You said something in the middle of that I can't pass up on, because it's even more hopeful than a lot of times. I think maybe with some that are uninitiated or tuning in for the first time or have an ancillary knowledge of Taoism or something, they might think of more just kind of being that stone in the river, and life's cascading around you. You just have to deal with it. It'll ebb and flow. But you had said that, and while that's great, and I'm sure it takes a while to build up, to have that resiliency and to be able, and to know that the sun will rise and then eventually night will turn to day. You had said that it's possible, if you're present or if you're focused or if you're paying attention, to extend, those good times, or sustain the joy, bliss, or maybe make that fall, make that descent into the darkness a little less deep, right? Or maybe more of a little bit of a blip than just a chasm. So what are some of the techniques people can use so that darkness, isn't extended, or doesn't totally vanquish all the light that they have had built up? We don't want people to just be so up and down, right? So what are some of the keys to more sustainability and balanced alignment?
So you've seen people practicing Tai Chi. It looks like this, and then it comes back, and then like this. If you ever see people that have advanced Tai Chi, they practice something called pushing hands, where two people touch their hands, and then they go back and forth with their energies against each other and with each other, both yielding and pushing forward, and yielding and pushing forward. So that's the natural rhythm of life. So let's say that you're out in the ocean and you want to get into shore. Well, the tide goes out and the tide comes in. So if you want to align yourself with the flow of that, you're going to swim like heck when the tide is going towards the shore, because you're going to use the energy to your advantage of the ocean. You're going to use it to your advantage. But when it turns around and it comes against you, you want to conserve your energy. So you don't try to fight against it. You just want to put out enough energy to hold your place. Because when it turns around and goes towards the shore again, you want to have that energy to move forward. So it's a matter of understanding that ebb and flow of life, understanding that it's a natural progression so you don't get thrown by it. So part of resilience is not bemoaning the dark side. It's a natural cycle flow of life. You can't have a bright side without a dark side. The other day I was walking into the gym at school and it was raining out. And the kid, there's, as you give your card to the kid to get in, it says, it's raining. It says, yeah, it's really raining out there. And I said something like, yeah, but if it don't rain, you can't enjoy the sunshine. And his eyes opened up and he leaned back, and it was like heaven had opened up, like he had some great insight, To me, that was just like a natural, yeah, well, of course, it was just like an of course statement. But for him, it was like a brand new statement. And sometimes, if you have been living in an understanding that cycle, you forget that for most folks, they are driven by the circumstances of their environment instead of understanding that it's just a natural progression, and not to fight against it, not to use your energy. That's, I guess, the answer to your question. Don't use your energy when using it is not productive. Hold on, back away. It's okay to back away. It's okay to take a break, but use the time to prepare, because the cycle will change. And then when you do go forward, you're going to have everything that you need to do it. And if you start to feel that, okay, I'm walking in molasses right now, so let me not try to fight the molasses. Let me just slow my pace down here, because I know that I'll walk out of the molasses and then I'll be able to run. So I want to be able to run when I can run. So it's getting that feel. Now, the practice of the I Ching is probably the most effective practice you can get to understand the flow, the ebb and flow of life. So I can tell you a little bit about the I Ching if you want me to.
Can you teach all of us that in the next
Excellent
30 minutes?
answer, though. That's excellent.
I can just tell you this: that the one, no pressure.
No pressure.
The I Ching. Carl Jung wrote some beautiful treatises about the I Ching because he was fascinated with it. And what he said it was a bridge between your intuitive mind and your verbal mind, your logical, rational mind. So the way that you practice the I Ching is you'll ask a question, not for a yes or no answer, but you ask a question like, what do I need to know about my job interview today? And then you throw the coins and you do a bunch of math. And this occupies your rational mind, your verbal mind. Meanwhile, your intuitive mind is working on the question. Now, the trick is, how do I get the intelligence that really resides within me and that I knew the answer all along intuitively? How do I get that over to my verbal mind so that I can effectuate it and put it into practice intentionally? So when the I Ching, you throw the coin and you make your math and you do everything, it will give you certain paragraphs to read in succession. And what Carl Jung discovered is that what happens when you do this is that your eyes will selectively pick out the words that your intuitive mind wants to transmit to your rational mind. And it seems like it's magic, but it's not. It's just effectively using your brain.
Yeah, no,
both sides.
That's one of the best ways the best way I've ever heard of it explained. And now that we have so much data on scientifically, neurobiologically, we know like this is true. And if you think back to, when people say, oh, you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness, or, go do something different and it will come to you. Even now that is more popular, it's like if you're getting anxious or overwhelmed, do math, do something that's more logical, switch you out of that mind, that part of your brain. So it's cool to see how like science is actually coming on board. Not that the ancients, they needed that per se. So thank you so much for sharing that, and I encourage people to.
As you say, sometimes you're working on a problem or trying to remember something and you just can't, and you go take a shower in the middle of the shower. Boom,
there it is. Yeah,
that is it. That's it happening.
Right. And right, we know those aha moments, we can't force them. Like the harder we try to squeeze them out, the more they're not going to come. I want to go back to the light and the dark, the yin and the yang, so to speak, and because I think it's so beautiful when you share how the good times or the bad times don't last. That's really optimistic for people, but also the good don't last. That's a little, sometimes in the beginning it's harder for people, like especially in our society, like it's supposed to be all good all the time, right? And so we know, okay, things are going really well. What do we do? Like, how do we stay present, but also prepare for when things might not? I'm thinking of the seasons, right? If it's spring and it's summer, you want to prepare for fall and winter, right? If it's, food, right? Food wise, just thinking, or we want to make sure we have enough firewood, or we want to make sure we have enough food stored up, like that we can get on board with. But when it happens in our everyday modern lives, sometimes we have this notion like, well, we shouldn't have any bads or any darks or any, you know, negative emotions. We're surpassing that. We're evolving, you know, we just need our prefrontal cortex and we'll figure it out. But, you know, what should we do if we're in the good times to prepare for the not as good times, or we're in like the depths of it and we think we're going to be there forever?
Yeah. So in Eastern thinking, the psychology, I'm not talking about any of the spiritual, just the Eastern psychology, says that if you reduce all of our discomfort down to the very roots of it, you get down to plus, minus, and neutral. Yeah, that says everything. If you get down to the roots of it, what we find is that all of our discomfort comes from wanting, which at the extreme is greed, from aversion, I don't like it, which at the extreme is hate, and ignorance. So, you know, if I love my new car and I love the new car smell, but the new car smell goes away, so then I'm disappointed because I want to have that. And I don't want it to become old. So I want this, I don't want that. I want this, I don't want that. But then the third root is ignorance. And the antidote to ignorance is wisdom. And so wisdom is it's the work of substituting curiosity for judgment. Judgment gives you your truth. I make a judgment, guilty, not guilty. Judge, it's the gravel. It's a judgment. That's a good person. That's a bad person. That person's too big. That person's too thin. These are all your truths. So the work of wisdom is to begin to substitute curiosity for that, and for your own self-judgments as well. And, you know, take on the job of creating hypothesis and experimenting and trying stuff out and seeing what the effects are. So it's part of learned knowledge and it's part of experiential knowledge. It's part heart knowledge. But that's where meditation, or at least a practice of mindfulness of some sort, really comes into play, because as long as you are your thoughts, going back to that, as long as you are your thoughts and that is your identity, you don't have any access to heart knowledge, experiential knowledge, and the like. You just don't have any access. It's there, it's the truth, you're in it, boom. But when you can step back from that and you can say, that didn't seem like it was a very helpful comment, or getting angry like that, wow, I don't know if that was really, you know, the best thing that I could have done at that point. And if the committee in your head is beating you up, it's really hard to be curious because you're too busy defending yourself from yourself. And meditation teaches us, if a river is the stream of consciousness that goes through your mind, and all the sticks and twigs on it are the individual thoughts, we generally live our life riding on one of those sticks. And if the river is smooth, great. If it's white water, great. If it's going over a waterfall, that's what we're living. But if you can take part of yourself and climb up on the bank of the river and watch yourself on the twig, you begin to develop this really cool place to be, where you can completely engage in life, and you can have all of the joy and all of the fear and all of the grief and all of the happiness and joy. You can experience all of life, but at the same time there's another part of you that's just watching it all and is stable and calm and stable. And meditation, within a few weeks, you learn where that place is in you and you begin to reconnect to it. And it's just really cool to have that place that you can watch yourself from. And
that's
from
really
there,
beautiful.
you gain wisdom.
Very profound. And I wanted to...
And not hard to
I think you're
attain.
muted.
I'm sorry.
No, I think
Me?
she might be muted.
Sorry,
She was talking about it.
I was just talking to myself. But I was wondering, and maybe you have a different word, but I find it helpful sometimes to use the word observer for people in the beginning. Would that be, a word you might introduce?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, when I'm working with secular people, I'll always use observer, or if they're more psychological, your authentic self, using a Jungian word.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to more spiritual people, or I've got a class out of a church or something like that, I'll go so far as to say it's your soul.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that might be a good segue into how do we take this more Eastern philosophy into a Western secular or Christianity.
Yeah, that's just a broad topic, right? But there's some things that you've talked about already that we can kind of really compare and contrast, right? So when you think about the darkness, as you were talking about, and kind of just going with the flow, right? In Christianity, I didn't get to ask you if that dealing with the yin and yang, is that just the natural state of the world universe, and it's just what human beings have to go through because that's just the way life is going to be structured? So that's why they have to deal with it. Whereas in Christianity, we're kind of more told those dark times are, man is fallen. They're sinners. It's their fault in many ways, right? And that is, that's a big difference, subtle or big, depending on how much what areas you want to focus on, right? Where so you have a little bit hope on both sides of it because you can just wait it out in a way, prepare, and then it'll come back to the river will flow. But then it seems like there's a little bit more agency if you have faith in the Western model, right? So you have that shame. It's your fault. You're a sinner. Man is fallen. But then you do have that way of getting out of it, right? If you pray, you follow whatever rituals, the biblical or your minister, priest has kind of set up for you, you can get out of that, and you do have more agency. So can you talk about a little bit about difference? Not to jump on what Tara was going to ask you, but I just thought if we focused it a little bit on kind of the lack of agency, or you don't want to have the agency, the more of flow, alignment, flow state. Whereas in the West, I think we want that control and, want to be able to change things. And if we do this, that, and the other thing, then we'll be able to get out of the darkness and we'll be saved.
Mm. So I agree with you on when you were saying about asking me about the cycle, and you said that something that we just have to go through. And I would agree with you in everything except I would change one word. I would just say it would be something that we get to go through. Instead of have to go through.
While you're going through it, you think you have to, and then after you're like, oh, I get to go through. I got to go through that.
But yeah, now as far as the question of agency goes, I think I get what you're asking me, and I would say this, that I think in the Eastern thought, here in the West, it's pretty much, here is Jesus Christ. And if you accept Jesus Christ in your heart and you accept him as your Lord and Master, he will somehow show you the way. He says, I am the way, and he will show you the way. And this is what you should believe, and this is what you have to believe in order to go to heaven. Christianity is not a monolith. and there are, I mean, the more evangelical Christianity says that. Matter of fact, my wife, who is today she is a recovering Southern Baptist Bible literalist. She once went off to church and she had very sad eyes, and she said to me, I just really hate it that I love you so much, but you're not going to go to heaven with me, because I hadn't been saved. And I said to her that I was sorry that she wasn't going to be reincarnated with me, and she slapped me. So yeah, I get that. But in the East, what they say is, we're not going to tell you what to believe. We're just going to tell you this. You set about and take on the work of cultivating generosity, gratitude, compassion, wisdom. You set about cultivating this, and we will show you how to cultivate them. We'll give you all these lessons, and we'll give you all of these different practices that you can do to actually raise your base levels of generosity and gratitude and compassion and the like. And you do that if you want to, and then you will come and understand your own concept of the universe. You will get there. In the East, we give it to you, and you got to figure out how. We give it to you kind of like, I don't mean to say that it's like taking acid, but they often say that acid gives you a spiritual experience, but it's so intense that you don't know what to do with it. And Christianity says, accept Jesus in your heart, and in one moment, you're going to be changed. And I don't know that actually works all that well. I in Christianity, they look at the resurrection and the crucifixion, the resurrection, as like the be all and end all of Christianity. I mean, you have to accept that. That's the main thing that it is. And I feel a little differently about it. I think that if Jesus, who was one of the most magnificent wisdom teachers of all time, had 40 more years to go out and teach, what that would have done. So as far as agency goes, in the East, he says, here, we've got the techniques. You can do them or not do them. It's up to you. If you want to be happy and joyful and effective and efficient, here's how to do it. You can do it or not do it. In the West, they say it differently. What the West has, though, that the East does not have, which is magnificent, is there is a model of unconditional love. Jesus represents a model of what it means to love unconditionally. And they do not have that in the East. And I think that, a good student of human nature would combine the model of unconditional love and see that as the possibility of what humankind can be. And here are all of these techniques and teachings and sutras and practices that you can do to develop that unconditional love. You put the two together and it becomes incredibly powerful.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think, the beauty of the modern day is that people do have the knowledge, right? Back 100 years ago, maybe we didn't have access to a lot of these traditions. So now we do have the best of both worlds,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fascinating. I agree, and I hadn't really thought of it in the way of, if we had 40, if Jesus gave us 40 more years, what would happen? That's such a beautiful creative imagination potential practice that I'm gonna have to do later. But yeah, I mean, the visual that I got when you were sharing that is the the yin and the yang, and then Jesus with his heart open, just like permeating through that yin and the yang. Is like, that's it. Like that's the essence of it all. And so, can you share um, how people that maybe like Brian and myself that are, on this journey bring like serve others with this, right? There's a lot here. And so how do we bring this to the public? I guess it's kind of asking, like, I'm cheating here. It's like, how can Brian and I bring this further, to because most of our listeners are from the West. I mean, we would love to expand it further, but how do we put, like, what's next, so to speak, right? The world is in two very different places. You have these people that are like, yes, let's just share, but then obviously, there's that the yang or the darkness that seems, some people would say, seems to overshadow some of the light that's emerging in the collective. Yeah, so I guess it's kind of two parts. Like, what do people, like us, do to continue this journey when it sometimes seems like it's an uphill battle, and what is next for your practice and the world? I know that's a lot, so take it whichever direction feels right.
I get it. So to answer the second question first, that it seems like there's a lot of darkness that overshadows the light. So I think that you have to, I mean, you're a hypnotherapist, and so you are completely, I'm sure, aware of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems, and how they interact and the like. So I kind of believe in evolutionary psychology, and we evolved. If you're a creationist, God created us for the Garden of Eden, and there's nothing in Scripture that said when you were waiting in line at the TSA pass point and your plane was late that God came down and redesigned your brain to deal with that kind of stress. I mean, so we still have the brain that was created for the Garden of Eden. But if you're an evolutionist, we evolved from Cro-Magnon to Homo sapiens as hunter-gatherers for 2 million years. And our bodies and our minds are designed for dangerous, jungle-like, primitive areas where we had to do a lot of physical work, and we ate a lot of food that was not calorie dense. We ate onions, field onions, and berries. And every once in a while, we'd kill a wild boar and feast, but that was now and again. Today, we get more at a McDonald's Happy Meal fat and sugar than we would have gotten in the jungle in a month. So no wonder there's an obesity epidemic. Our minds are the same thing. We're constantly looking for danger. Our minds are designed that way because the cobra and the tiger and the poison this and the other things that we might have. So that's why our mind wanders all the time. That's why we go into default mode and we're always looking around. And the world will give us plenty of stuff to see. The only difference is that the danger is not a cobra or a tiger. It's a deadline, or it's an assignment, or it's being late for, the theater, or it's not having dinner ready for your wife, which I see a lot. So those are
Just
the things that, stimulate, hypothetically. So those are the kinds of things that stimulate our sympathetic nervous system and drop a bunch of cortisol, and which rots our nervous system and causes us stress and everything else. There's not a lot that comes to us through the world by default that stimulates our left prefrontal cortex, which is the rest and digest area. So we have to intentionally do things that give us wisdom and pleasure. Whether it's jogging or doing crossword puzzles, but we have to intentionally build up that left side of the brain, because we can't reduce the right side. Science has shown us what you resist persists. And when you try to throw thoughts out of your head, they just persist. You can't reduce the sense of fear, but you can mitigate it by increasing the sense of joy. We have to do that intentionally. The other thing that you say, I don't want to proselytize my own work here, but I did write a book, and my wife, as I mentioned, was a a Southern Baptist Bible literalist. She literally believes in the Garden of Eden and Noah's Ark, and all the Bible stories are historical fact. I always thought that her science was a little wrong. She thought my stuff was weird. But we met on our values, and she is a saint, and I love her and adore her because she's just out there doing and making a difference in people's lives, and I just love her for what she does. And so the Tao Te Ching is 81 chapters, small, short, one-page chapters that have all the wisdom of Taoism in it. It could be read like a devotional. So I would ask her what was the lesson that she learned in church, and she would tell me, and I would say, that sounds like what Lao Tzu said about leadership, or that sounds. I would look in the Tao Te Ching, and I would find the passage that mirrored what she learned in church. So I said, I wonder if I can find that in the Bible. So then I would, thank you, Google. I'd say, what does the Bible say about humility? What does the Bible say about this? So I got into a very deep study of the Bible. And I found that every single passage in the Tao Te Ching had a corresponding passage in the Bible. And now the only trick, because the Tao Te Ching has a certain cadence and a certain rhythm, and it's not rhyming poetry, but it's in the vein of meditations or poetries. So now the only trick was to use that biblical story and the biblical terminology and try to write it in the same cadence as the Tao Te Ching. And so I would do it one page at a time, read it to her, and she loved it. And all of a sudden, we started to get a Rosetta Stone that allowed us to converse and talk about our belief systems with each other. And we found out that neither of us was so weird, that we actually believed in the same things. So piece by piece by piece, I did all 81 chapters. And I told a few people about it, and handed out a few PDFs. Somehow a national publisher heard about it, and they called me up and they wanted to publish it. So now it's been published, and what is the most exciting part of it for me is that I get letters from all over the country, and mostly what they say is, I walked away from the church because I was gay, and I wasn't allowed in because they told me that I was an abomination. And I turned my back on the church, but I always loved Jesus. And you have given me the opportunity to reignite my relationship with Jesus without the exclusivity and the dogma of organized religion. So a lot of folks, not only, gay people, but people from all walks of life that didn't like the science or didn't like the exclusivity or didn't like, the sin and hell and burning in hell, and questioned why somebody in Africa who never heard of Jesus is going to burn in hell for the rest of all eternity. And they just couldn't accept that part of it. But now they could get the true teachings of Jesus in a way that was outside of that dogma. And it's made a difference to a lot of folks' lives. So I would say the answer to your question is check out my book. And in the back of it, in the appendix, is the Tao Te Ching, is the original version of the Tao Te Ching. So you could read chapter 5 and then turn to the back and see what was the original Chinese writing. Not in Chinese, of course.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Beautiful. Now, and you did mention Lao Tzu, so we want to give him a shout out too, because
Okay.
he's we haven't talked about him a whole lot on our show, but I think this is a great time for our listeners and our viewers to dive into that, because it's such a wonderful master. That being said, what about the meditation book that our listeners can check out of yours?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of people have misperceptions about meditation. They think that it's something about emptying the mind or finding peace or, being able to focus more. And the practice It's hard to say. The practice will produce that, but that's not why you practice. It's like in football. I mean, ultimately, you want to have a touchdown, but the idea is just to do this play right. Let's get another 10 yards. Eventually, we want to get that touchdown, but right now we just want to execute this play right. And so meditation is a lot of people, like I say, a lot of people think it's about emptying the mind. It's not. The instructions are very, very simple. Just find something and intentionally put your attention on it. And then people think, oh, well, I have to keep my attention on it and focus. No. Your mind wanders. It goes nuts. It goes, what do I have to do yesterday? And did I leave the stove on? And what am I going to get at the supermarket? And I had that assignment that's going to default. But at some point, because you intentionally had the intention to put your attention on the candle or your breath or something, your mind reminds you, oh, you're not paying attention to the candle. And when that happens, you get this little startled feeling. It's kind of like when you're listening to somebody and then all of a sudden you realize you're not listening to them. Yeah, you get this little oh, and internally you feel, oh, I'm not listening to them. We call that waking up. And
Could you
where
repeat
the
that?
healing, okay.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Oh. No, you got me. That was a good one. I got that. Yeah. Good one. So we call that waking up. And where the work, where the progress, where the learning, where the separation from your thoughts occurs is in the waking up and the noticing that your mind wandered and then coming back and beginning again. If your mind doesn't wander, that the meditation is waking up and returning. It's not losing your focus. So people that say, oh, I could never meditate because my mind goes wild, I say, well, you're meditating when you notice that your mind went wild. That is meditation. And when people finally understand what it is, then it's not as challenging or as, tinkle, tinkle, crystal as it seemed to be. So I wrote a little book. It's a little 40-page book called What is Meditation Anyway? Is it for me? What it is, what it's not, and how to do it.
Awesome.
It's just a little 40-page.
No, one of the things that Tara had mentioned early on was about, is lotus required, or there's some of these things that, you see with the stereotypical meditative monk or guru somewhere. But I think that one thing that we can definitely agree on, and we always preach out your oneself and journey to your best self, is consistency. I have to imagine that you can't just read a page, do it for a week. And we talked about preparing for the storm or preparing for those adverse moments and those challenges and the darkness and everything. So can you speak a little bit about the importance of consistency and following through and the ritual?
Yeah. Consistency and accountability kind of go hand in hand. I go to the gym every morning, at least 5 days a week, not because I want to, but because I got 2 gym buddies. And if I don't go, they're going to say, where's Bob? So I drag myself out of bed and I get over there and I get to the gym because I'm accountable to them. And they're accountable to me. And of course, we rib each other a little bit when somebody doesn't show up and the like, all in good humor. So I say that to say that there are books out there where you can gain knowledge. There are apps out there where you can kind of learn to relax. But if you really, really want to engage the practice to the point where you feel like you've gotten to I think the place that you want to get to is you want to get to a place where you understand it and its benefits well enough to make an intelligent decision as to whether or not this is a practice you want to engage in for the rest of your life. And if you want to seriously explore it, I just have to say there's nothing like a coach. For years when I first started going to finding out about meditation, I meditate for 2 weeks, stop. 2 months later, I'd say, gee, I should be doing it again. 3 days, stop. It was probably a couple of years. Then I got a coach. From then on, it was consistent. I was accountable. And not only that, but the coach was there. Stuff comes up when you meditate. Not right away, but after a while, some of the stuff comes up, and it's kind of like you got to get it up and out. And your coach is there, and your coach has been through it, and and he just continues to remind you that it's just a natural process, and you're doing great, and and you can keep going. So, yeah, there's nothing like a coach.
Yeah,
Awesome.
well said. Well said. I think you
Absolutely.
really, simplified. Sometimes we make things a little more complicated. Like just like you were saying, we take things very seriously. Sometimes it can just be as simple as consistency, accountability. Get a coach.
Yeah, this has been really helpful, and I think that one thing that I would impress on, I was going to ask you, but I think that you've kind of beat me to it with the answer in this past hour, of just explaining it in such a relatable way. Because one of the things that I was going to say was, I think that some of the hesitation that listeners might have, or especially men in our society, is that if you do step back, there is something about giving up control that makes people afraid and nervous to do. And stepping back and getting to flow state and losing command and control. And I feel like they think that they'll take advantage of. A journey, if it begins with a one step, or if 1,000 miles begins with one step, right? Well, then someone's going to zoom past me in their Tesla, right? If I just go with the flow and kind of let this elderly woman merge in front of me on the way to work, then I'm going to get the next light, and then I'm going to be late, right? If they take a step back, take a breath, and get in alignment with the world around them, there's going to be people that are still cutting corners and not doing what they're doing and getting ahead of them. So that's something that I think you've done a good job reassuring and showing the benefits. So do you kind of agree that that's why people don't take the step and to try to get into a more aligned state?
I think they're scared of the consistency. They're scared of failure. They're scared of that. Here's a little something for your business folks. There is an ROI, a return on investment, that is quantifiable for the time that you spent meditating every day. You spend 15 minutes meditating every day, or even sitting quietly, even if you don't do an active meditation. You just have your coffee, go out on the back porch, and just sit and watch the birds for 15 minutes. The research shows that you're looking at anywhere between 300 and 450% ROI on your time. In other words, 15 minutes spent quietly will return to you anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half of your day.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
We didn't, and we did not pay him to say that. We have so many people. So many people are like, I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time. If I hear I don't have time one more time. So thank you for that.
Okay.
What happens is that intuitive part of your brain is going through all of your to-dos for the day, and it is prioritizing them. And what happens is that when you go out and start doing your day, because you gave your intuitive mind the chance to work on the prioritizing of your day, it will seem like you're making choices that wind up being more efficient. You do this before you do that. You automatically, if you have to run 3 errands, you do it in a circle rather than haphazardly. And it seems like it's natural, but it's only because you gave your brain the chance to do some work for you.
Yeah. And I also I love how you said, watching, like looking out in nature. You could sit on your porch or stare out the window. You can go for a walk without, any intense, music. It's not, you're not saying that you have to do 2 hours of physical activity or chanting or intense, breath work. These are all beautiful things, but it's just that 15 minutes and consistently.
Mm-hmm.
One last question
Tara,
for me.
and especially for the author, he's gonna have a great answer. No pressure here, Bob.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Aside from your book, after our listeners read all of your books and share them with all of their family and friends, what one book would you recommend to someone that was influential for you? Even the beginning, middle, and in any way.
The Tao Te Ching.
Yeah.
And I think Stephen Mitchell's translation is probably the most modern, and it uses he and she interchangeably, and it is the easiest to digest. Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching. I would say it's very easy to read. You can read a chapter in 2 minutes. And you don't read it from cover to cover. You pick it up and read it randomly. Or you can read it cover to cover. It's like a devotional. But it has all of the wisdom of Taoism is in it.
Yeah.
I mean, it talks about leadership. It talks about governance. It talks about self-governance. It talks about consistency. It talks about resiliency.
Yeah.
It talks about all of these things. And that would be the one book. But if you ask me which books influenced me the most, I recently came to this understanding. It was 2 books. To Kill a Mockingbird, because I fell in love with Atticus Finch when I was 12 years old, and look at me, I became a lawyer. What do you think about that? And the other was Don Quixote.
Oh, all right.
Because I'm always tilting at windmills.
That's
so my God. And obviously both classics, just so funny. Like if anyone thinks it's too thick and too old, just thinking about windmills, and especially him at the beginning of the journey, like always makes me laugh. And it's just so well written. Great choices.
Thank you for recommending the specific translation, because sometimes that could be overwhelming too.
Mm-hmm.
And can somebody read a page and then have their 15-minute of meditation, contemplation,
Absolutely.
stillness?
That's how you should do it.
Okay.
You should read a page and then do that. And then if you want to practice, this is out of print now.
The illustrated I Ching. All right. R.L.
The illustrated I Ching by R.L. Wing. It has the first few pages has all of the instructions on how to do the practice, how to throw the coins, how to do the math, and then it's got all of the chapters and all of the readings in it. And this is excellent. We have an interfaith convention at my university every year, and I always teach a breakout group on this, and everybody loves it when they get into it.
Yeah.
So
one thing that you did mention, it's endless because you keep saying things that are piquing our interest.
Yeah.
But one of the things that for our listeners that may be a little bit hesitant or it's outside their comfort zone, one of the great things about the ancient Chinese religions is they're really connected with philosophy as well. There's also that earthly element of evergreen wisdom. When you said the leadership and the government, I mean, these are a lot of the things you can relate to the modern world. So even if you're not doing it necessarily from a spiritual, I mean, that will connect you with the spiritual part of it. So I think that a lot of this stuff that you're recommending and those devotionals, people can really connect with, and it's going to be very relatable and not mystical or too esoteric for them. Do you agree with that?
Not at all. Example, Lao Tzu said about leadership, says you should never seek or strive for leadership. And you should rise to leadership, although when called. And when your work is done, you should step down. And in that way, your work gets the credit and not you. And therefore, your work will endure, which is ultimately the most important thing. You do it for the work. You don't do it for your own self-aggrandizement. If you look at the Bible, I mean, the Bible says Jesus went where he was called. And it says that when his work was done, he ascended. So there
Love
you
it.
go.
There's a
Love it.
connection. Great way to tie it all
There's a
together.
connection.
We have been joined by the very inspirational, profound, and humble as well. Just so many great nuggets and bits of information that you're going to have to come back and listen to this one again. Mr. Bob Martin, thank you so much. Bob, before we sign off, where can people find your book? Where can people find out and connect with you online and, give us a little preview of what they will see when they get there?
So my website is A Wise and Happy Life, all one word, awiseandhappylife.com. And when you go there, you'll find out about me. You'll find out about how I teach my meditation courses. You'll find out about my couple of books that I've written. And you'll also have a button to push to download the free ebook that I told you about. So everything's there in all one place, awiseandhappylife.com.
Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you so much. A pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. We appreciate you being part of this community. For more resources, insights, and ways to connect, head over to youroneself.com. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Overcast. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep aligning your mind, body, and spirit, and peace, love, and self-discovery.